My role today is to start this off and take my perspective of the T, how I arrived at the T, and as a framework for understanding the transition from college to work. In order to do that, I need to go back 6 decades and talk about the transition experience that most students went through, maybe you went through when you were graduating from college. Actually, it's like, this is where I grew up. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and it wasn't like taking a stroll. It was a hike. The transition took a little effort, but it wasn't difficult. It was a stretch. You took a big stretch. Yes, engineers and business had a little easier time, but everybody made it across. And during those periods of time, what you saw were students didn't have to have a lot of experience to make it across. Yes, there was co-op and there was internships, but there were very few students participated, even in fields like engineering. And you could substitute other kinds of experiences at the university to make that transition. Why? Because on the other side, you were in your position, that first position, for 4 to 5 up to 6 years, and you were mostly likely, 60% of starting jobs were training programs, rotation programs, where the employer did a lot of training and taught students how to work and how to build the skill sets along with their knowledge skills to be able to function in the workplace. It was and that's how it worked. And at that time, about 65% of all college students in the U.S. were transitioning into Fortune 500 companies. And for example, in those days when I started the Institute, General Motors was hiring 200 college graduates, bachelor's degree candidates out of Michigan State each year alone. And Dow Chemical, 135. And so we built systems around how we transition, and we still use those same systems. And there's a big disconnect because the transition began to change in the early 1990s, and it looks something like this today. It's like a jump into space, and you hope you make it to the other side. Things changed from a very linear, organized economy and job market to one that was very networked, cross-functional, as boundaries came down, and enhanced by technologies. We began to see significant changes in how we organized work and what was expected. And what went off in the 90s was the loyalty was gone from companies. Therefore, this long time period that most companies had to train people and organize them was gone. And so what they did is no more training, but you really had to have experience to come in. So they pushed everything back towards the academy to make sure that these young people were coming in were not only educated and had the knowledge base, but also had the training that offered them to get off to a fast start. Your tenure in jobs now was less than 24 months, and you began to see rapid changes in the workplace and a different set of skills. Likewise, now about 50 to 55, maybe even 60% of current graduates work for companies that are under 500. Okay? And we celebrate when General Motors hires 17 now a year. So things have really changed. Now, for the faculty out there, this was not something that we asked for. We didn't sign up for it when we got our PhDs. It wasn't in our pedagogy when we got it, but it's here. And we are now looked at as the talent base for the economy. Anything post K-12. We're here and we were responsible as grow talent at the bachelor's level, the graduate level, the faculty level, and the alumni level, because this is an ongoing 24/7 process that doesn't end just with a bachelor's degree. Now, I have a lot of friends in academia that say this too will pass. These downturns in the economy have always passed before, but folks, we've reset at a new normal. And the normal is going to change constantly. And you've just seen the antecedents of change, just the inklings of change, because it's going to continue to be very fast out there. It's going to continue to be chaotic, and knowledge as we go culturally and everything begins to be negotiated quite quickly. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg of what smart machines are going to do. And if we look at even the most optimistic position on smart machines and the fact that there'll still be human assistance, we see great disruptions in majors that we consider safe and hold them up, like accounting and finance and engineering and medical and law is going to be under siege again from huge transformations in technology. So we're going to be continuing in this process of reinventing and accelerating the kind of things that young people have to do. Now, how I got there started back in the 1990s, early 1990s, when we began to reorganize and see that we needed new skill sets. And what happened here is groups started at the University of Wisconsin trying to get together, it kind of faded away. The one group that resonated and really made a big difference was ABAT, the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. Many of you in this room already know about that. They stayed their course. They have been the most diligent about keeping and understanding this changing environment. It spilled over onto campus. I took that work and broadened it out and did a lot of work on skills during the middle part of the 90s. And what ended up at Michigan State was taking what I thought 16 core critical skills, and Kelly Bishop's here, but he took it and they worked with employers and we developed it in our 12 essentials. There are basically, 12 to 16 core competencies that every student has, and they're never going to change now. I'll talk about that in a minute. At the same time I was doing that, there was a group at Bell Labs under the direction of Robert Kelly that was looking at star performers, those that were in their 30s and early 40s that stood out among everybody else. And it wasn't that they went to Harvard and MIT, sorry Jim, and anyway, and things like that. And grade point, it was how they accelerated in networking and managing themselves and understanding that they had to know who they were and take charge of their career. They were leaders and followers and perspective and being able to get up and do show and tell. These, and then the three core ones in the middle that drove everything. Number one, did you have mastery of your discipline? Number two, could you critically think across functional and discipline areas? And number one, could you take the initiative? That was a star performer. Okay, we go into the year 2000, the first decade of this new century, and things began to change. A colleague at Iowa State and I began to look, and things were really changing quickly out there. We changed the question to employers by looking at a whole set of job postings for a decade and looked at, and what we found was that job postings were becoming, over that decade, more and more about broad boundary spanning skills and less about content. And what we also found in there that was the current job descriptions that were for internships looked like the starting jobs 5 years ago. In a sense, the starting job had moved back into the university as the internship or co-op. We took that work and we did some focus groups. We went out and did a broad survey of all kinds of employers about what was accelerating the fastest. We wanted to know what was important. We all knew they were important. We wanted to know how fast they were growing and how we're critical. And all of a sudden we began to see some stretching and pulling of these skills as technology and new ways. And by golly, by science initiative, being able to build and sustain professional organizations, high level of analytical skills, data set management, high levels of communication skills, an insatiable quest to learn nonstop once you get into the workplace. And we could go on. Global understanding. First time American employers really got in the bandwagon about global understanding. How to build a team, particularly if you're in nonprofits, education, and health. How to become a mentor from the get-go. You're not just going to be mentored by somebody else, but you're going to be asked to mentor. New sets of skills, competencies coming in new ways. And what was leading this was not engineering this time with it had done it the previous. Now we saw the employers from healthcare, accounting, business, social science, and all those way out ahead because they had to catch up. And now it's across the board service science demand. Okay? And out of that also we found that you have two choices. It's really simple. You can either be a liberally educated technical graduate or you can be a technically educated liberal arts graduate. Because 55 employers fall in the middle of wanting a balance between the two. Only on the extreme we have 35% that want just strictly accounting or strictly engineering. Okay, but what the last thing we arrived at was, Thomas Kelly was right, star performers, but now we want star performers from the day they graduate. Nothing, not this 12 years, we want them from the day they graduate. Which brings me to the last thing I've done is what my staff calls the potato study. Little do they know about the state of Idaho, but they call it the potato study because I've been out at Boise And we did a completely different technique with employers there about how we wanted to know how these skills go together, because Likert scales just tell you how important they are, and they don't relate them. So we did contingent evaluation, and we found out that they come in bundles. There's not one silver bullet or two silver bullets, folks, that if you just focus on them, everything's going to be copacetic. They come in bundles, and they're skill bundles, and they may vary by your employers in your region, but they come in bundles. And the dark ones, the highlighted, emphasized, bold ones, are ones we contribute directly to the major, and the other ones come from multiple experiences, not just the academic experiences. They can come from many, many different experiences. And so we have to integrate across everything that the student does. Another component of this study that was really important was we began to look at work behaviors and attitudes, because they're inseparable from work skills. And we're always focusing on skills, but these folks are key. Their work attitudes they come in with, their values they come in with, how they act and behave in the workplace are critical. And being accountable and responsible, being mature, work ethic, being able to adapt, are all things that these need necessary to be successful. Now, the thing that makes a framework for understanding this, which is why we're here today, is the T, and I get a few minutes to talk about the T. The T has some components. Just think of it as a metaphor to describe things. It's a framework, but the components are important. There's depth. The disciplinary depth, I think we will understand. The systems depth is what IBM brings to the table. You need to be able to function in systems, and you have to take the time to learn a system. There are different ways to learn a system. IBM has a nice nomenclature that I like, but we can overlay it with grand challenges, big problems, just like Susan started out with. You can overlay this, but this is the systems, the human systems we engage in every day. They go from flows, like transportation, water, food, energy, to human activities, banking, education, healthcare, and then the governing ones. They make it really nice. You can think of systems this way. You can put these problems together. But what we need is young people to be immersed in these systems, to know how they can navigate them, know how they can move through them with the skill sets they bring, not finding something that's directly related to the degree, but the skills and competencies they bring with them. This will be probably a big challenge because we aren't organized our curriculum this way, and we don't teach students to navigate. I mean, all the pieces are on most of our campuses, but we haven't put them together this way. We come back, and then we have the depth part, and we have the first one, again, is this knowledge base. One is interdisciplinary, and being able to function in interdisciplinary teams and talk and discuss with others outside your discipline in a way that you can communicate. Interdisciplinary knowledge is difficult. It's a challenge. Thomas Kuhn talked about this, and because of the cultures of different disciplines often clash, making interdisciplinary work more difficult. We've seen a lot of advances in interdisciplinary research and teaching and things in the last 5 or 6 years that I've ever seen it before. The many systems I'm going to punt on because undergraduates need to learn one system. The second system is going to come a little later. The top part are the boundary spanning. Boundary spanning literature has talked since the 90s about the skills that people need, and these include critical thinking, teamwork, cultural awareness, the things that we talk about every day. Now, the most important part of the T for me is the me. And when we talk about I's tend to advance by pushing the boundaries of their discipline. They do it better and better, find new techniques. Doesn't mean they're devoid of any inner sense of person. But to be a me, you have to know who you are, the direction you're going in, how you relate to others, and a host of being comfortable with me as you, because there's no hook. When you're spanning all these multiple boundaries of function and geography, you have to have control of yourself. And what this all summarizes down is what Herbert Simon was working on near the end of his career in a final paper he worked with. Jim and I know this and shared this. He gets down to 3 things, whether you're an entrepreneur or anything else. 3 things. What do you know? How do you relate and know others? And how do you know yourself? So that's basically what we're talking about. We can organize learning in a number of ways. I like this from IBM. It kind of resonated with me. You put your grand challenges and issues in the center, and instead of having silos, you put the faculty around it. And each department and discipline contributes to one of the grand challenges. So when students enter, they take a grand challenge or a system as their home, and they get to see this interaction of faculty. They get to see this dynamic of transdisciplinary interactions going on. They can then pick their major. But what's really cool, because surrounding the circle is all the systems or all the grand challenges, so you immediately put people out into that world, and you make sure that they have connections. So you bring, it becomes what I call rooms, learning spaces without walls. The walls have to become invisible. And you have to reach across in multiple different ways and bring context to learning from the get-go. And that's why we need partnerships, and that's why we need collaboration, because we have to bring the inside out and the inside out and the outside in to make these learning systems work. Now, nurturing the T is going to be really critical, and this is what I need everybody to understand. I found in the Boise study on the alumni part, I should have been a little smarter and anticipated this, but we found lag effects from the way when they entered the alumni entered the workplace to where they really kicked in being able to do T things. I should have known this because Robert Kagan in Over Our Heads has been talking about this for decades. Baxter McGolda, if you're into learning systems, talks about self-authorship, and then you can also go to the literature of Jeff Arnett at Maryland and Larry Nelson at Brigham Young University, and you can find this decade of the 20s is very difficult, that students cognitively, emotionally, culturally, and physically just haven't developed yet to do most of the things we're asking them to do. And it isn't until their late 20s. So, folks, we have to nurture these, because the growth of the T really comes after you've got, you know, some experience. It's going to really, and I'm going to show you an illustration. My dad was a peach farmer, had peaches, and he grows. So we start out with a peach, and we never put it the seeds, that we grew it in hothouses. But you can think this is K-12 education. And they're started there. And then the next step is we bring them out, and they're very small. So this would be the first year of college. And the second year it grows, and we'll just let it grow. It gets you become better at your depth of your knowledge. You begin to sprout the laterals that begin to talk about the T, and then you begin to get near graduation, and you get a little bigger and you're a little stronger. And finally you end up with here. But now here's the first time that fruit begins to appear, but they're not universal. In peaches, we were 4 or 5 years, we begin to see fruit form, and this is what happens. Employers see a few people that have got early fruit, and they think everybody should be like them. But most of your students haven't developed those capabilities yet. And so when we do want this tree to be the T, that's my dad's last peach tree, and the T, this happens between 5 and 8 years. They grow very, very fast, and they begin to be prolific fruit, and you really then have to start supporting the laterals. Now, this is not going to happen, folks, from business. You are not going to get this, okay? You are not going to get this robust T. It's not going to happen. Now, I'm not going to do justice here in the final minutes to my friend Steve Ethquith, because he and I talk about, and he can describe young T's better than I can. But Steve, I apologize. This is the best we can draw. But Jim, here they're coming, and what you're going to get are a lot of little T's of all different shapes and sizes that now you are going to have to nurture. In fact, this is a true collaboration. Colleges and universities think once they get the degree and move off, it's over. No, the critical part of what we do happens in the next 5 to 7 years, and we have to stay with it in partnership with business, or it's not going to work. These students will be just left, and they'll just have a social job for the rest of their life. It's that age from 22 to 30 where most of this takes place. Yep, business wants it at 22, and it's not going to happen. They're not, as I said, not emotionally ready. They're not cognitively ready for many of the skills that you're being asked to do. So it's an ongoing process. You got a degree, but you haven't really graduated. And so this true collaboration all the way through is necessary if we're going to produce expertise that will then evolve into whatever they're going to evolve into in the workplace. So with that, it's Jim's turn.